about some people and they get mad and they almost make you mad. You're like, man, I wasn't even trying to get mad, but they making me mad. Never even realizing life may be protecting you from something. Like it's like the 9/11 incident. I was doing some research on it. I'll never forget. I'm doing research on it. Terrible incident. A lot of people lost their lives. Senseless act. And it talked about in this article the other side of it. And in the other side, what they spoke about was that morning, a gentleman had to take his daughter to kindergarten, and he really wanted to get to some meetings, but because he had to take his daughter to kindergarten, he couldn't make it to the meetings on time, and so he just called out the whole day. And his wife asked him that morning, he was getting dressed, his wife said to him, "Can you please take our daughter to kindergarten?" He said, "I really need to be at these meetings." She said, "Can you please take our daughter to kindergarten? I really need to be at work." He said, "I really need to get to these meetings." She asked him one more time, "Can you please? I beg you, can you please?" He said, "All right, I'll do it." He called in, didn't go to work that day, and because he took his daughter to kindergarten, it spared his life. One gentleman on the New Jersey Turnpike, headed to the same buildings, New Jersey Turnpike, accident happens, breaks down, can't get there on time, and because it happened, a situation that he couldn't control, it spared his life. One gentleman got a new pair of shoes, walking to work, got a blister on his foot. He had to go back home, change his shoes, and because he had to go back home to change it, it saved his life. One gentleman walking down the street, they send him to get some donuts. A guy comes, spills some coffee on his shirt. He had to go and change his shirt. Because he had to go and change his shirt, it spared his life. The other side. Meaning things happening out of their control, and because it happened out of their control, it spared their life. Meaning at a certain point, when do we control the controllables? Attitude. When do we control the controllable? Focus. When do we control the controllables? Commitment, dedication, spirit, the energy and the passion that I bring into an environment. When do we control the controllable? I couldn't control. I got a paralyzed right arm and hand. I couldn't control my career ended. I couldn't even plan for it. But when it happened, I could step back and say, okay, life, I can no longer play the game of football, but let me extract that dedication and commitment from the game. I can step back and say, my arm and my hand is paralyzed. My dedication isn't. My purpose isn't. My arm and my hand is paralyzed. My work ethic, it isn't. My purpose isn't. My arm and my hand is paralyzed. My dedication isn't. My purpose isn't. Meaning my reason for why I first started, it never got paralyzed. And as talented, as brilliant, as strong as people are, it's the saddest thing in the world when I see people just stop giving everything they got to something that they once loved. Because I think we all know the raw truth of it is, people don't burn out because of what they do. People burn out because life makes them forget why they do it. Meaning life hits them and hits them with something till they just like, man, if I gotta go through that, like I'm not bringing it today, man. And every day is not a good day. Everything is not all peaches and cream. But that's why the culture is so important. That's why when the culture is set, we know what we bring to it, and we know how we get down because we know what we're working for, and the purpose of it is greater than any individual.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in to part 6. Glad everyone's joined. Just wanted to give everyone kind of that little challenge today. Is obviously in this time we can't control everything going on, when we're going to get back to what we do. But, I think now is where you really find, do you love what you do, controlling what you can control, and, making the best of the situation we're all in. So, hopefully that challenged some of you today. So excited to get to part 6, joined by 3 really high-level guys that I've actually gotten to know for several years now, all 3 on different levels. So I'm excited to really hear from them and dive in, hear from their journey, and hopefully we can get 1% better today. So first up, we're going to start with Coach Dustin Kerns. Had the really great opportunity to meet Coach Kerns back in the camp days when I was working camps at Wofford. He was actually had come through on his second stint, and he was obviously really gracious to me, and really enjoyed getting to know him through those days, and obviously have maintained a connection with him through his journeys to where he's at now. So obviously Coach Kerns, someone I consider a friend, and glad he's on here to share. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Coach Dustin Kerns.
Thanks, Dave. Good to see everybody. Good to, Dave I've known for probably 15 years, and he's been a good friend, and I've always admired him in a lot of different ways, and appreciate him asking me to speak. I see a lot of good friends on here, and I'll get going so you guys can get to Jonas and Duane, so you guys can learn something instead of certainly listen to me. But what I want to, Dave wanted me to share just some things being a head coach, and then I was going to share some things that I look for in an assistant coach. And whatever I say, I mean, I don't think it's right. It's just for a matter for what I may believe in, but it's really not the right way. I think in coaching, like Dave just showed a video, we're in a labor of love. This is certainly a labor of love, but in coaching, 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4. And it sucks. And but we got to understand that in coaching, there's no playbook or manual to really teach you how to become a head coach. You can become a head coach in college basketball a lot of different ways. And we've seen that. You can be an AAU coach and become a head coach. You can become just a former NBA player, become a head coach. You can become a Division II coach, Division III coach, junior college coach. There's so many ways you can become a head coach. And so a lot of times, like I said, 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4. And it's not like we all have this certain path. I certainly believe that, I'd interviewed for some head coaching jobs before I became the head coach at Presbyterian. And one mistake that I made is I always tried to tell the committee or tell whoever I was talking to really what I thought they wanted to hear. And that was looking back on it, that was a mistake. The Presbyterian was the very first time where I didn't think I was going to get it because some of the things that I told the people. I told them I didn't know if they really wanted to win. I was very just what I felt like genuine and authentic and real with them. And I remember leaving the interview, calling Mike Young, who my boss at the time, and he was like, "What'd you think?" I said, "I really don't know." I might have been a little too real with them, but I got the job, and so I interviewed for some more places after Presbyterian, and I felt like that I did the same thing, with the people here. So when you go into these situations, whether it's interviewing for an assistant job or head coaching job, I really think being authentic and genuine is what people are looking for. And I like I said, I certainly have made that mistake. I think that when you go and take a job, like when I went to Presbyterian, a job that at the time it had, I think 14 straight losing seasons, and you just got to bet on yourself. Okay. And you got to bloom where you're planted. I know that sounds cliche-ish, but you can ask my staff, and I've got a tremendous staff, and I'll get into that in a minute, but you can ask my staff. I never, ever once in 2 years talked about another job. I promise you, I never did. And so we just dug our heels in and did everything we could to make Presbyterian a winning program, and we did. Won 20 games and went to the Elite 8 of the CIT, and so you just got to bloom when you're planted and dig in. This was a true story. I was sitting in Orlando recruiting. I was probably two or 3 years before I became a head coach at Presbyterian. I was sitting with another Division I head coach watching a game. He said, "Hey man, if you want to become a head coach, you got to leave Wofford. You can't get a head coaching job from there." Inside, and he's a guy I respect, but inside it just fueled my fire. Like, how does he know? Once again, there's no manual. You guys can become a head coach from where you are, okay? But if you just dig deep and do your job, where you're at, I think that I really felt like at Wofford, all I did was try to make Wofford the best program we could be. And sure enough, I found an opportunity, but I was not out there chasing jobs. I really wasn't. And I think that, I remember after Presbyterian opened, this was a job that I felt like, wow, who knows? I mean, I might be able to get involved. But sure enough, I didn't have to quote chase it. They eventually reached out. And so if you just do a good job, people will notice. One thing that I wanted to share was, what I look for. I got three, my assistant coaches have been with me. I brought them all, my whole staff with me to App State. But, these guys do a really good job. Patrick Moynihan, Frank Young, and Bob Zork. And when I hired them, none of them had Division I recruiting experience. I didn't care about that because if you've got some of the things that I'm getting ready to talk about, you'll be able to recruit. And so I'm not a kind of guy, he's got to have recruiting experience. I mean, in fact, all the guys that I hired had been at Division II. They had been at Division I in some level as an ops or a GA, but it's about who you are more so than what you've done. But here's some of the things that there's 5 things that I really look for, and when I'm looking to hire an assistant coach. One, I think you got to be a teacher. All right. Kids communicate less now. As a coach, you've got to talk more to your players. We're a program, we want to lead the league in player relationships. And so, I think you got to find guys that you got to be an assistant coach that, like I said, knows how to communicate with kids. And go to you don't have to, as a head coach, I don't want to be coaching coaches. And so you've got to hire guys that are into that are going to go and seek out a guy and take him to lunch or go get a coffee and at least be a communicator. And then also on the floor or it's all, but be a guy that really knows how to deal with people. 2, I really look for guys that are persuasive motivators. Find ways to get your players to do things that they cannot do. Not every kid can be coached the same. I always tell our coaches all the time, hey, listen, we know you can't talk to him this certain way. You've got to talk to this kid this certain way. And I think that we try to spend a lot of time with the players and let them talk. They'll give you the answers of how to communicate with them, but every kid can be coached the same. We try to treat every kid with fairness and respect, but certain kids need guys on them all the time, checking classes. They just need it. Certain guys don't. 3, I really look for guys that are, relationship driven. You guys all on this call right now are arguably relationship driven because you've got relationships and coaches the coaches that have got invited to this. And I think that's terrific. You guys are all wanting to get better. But relationship driven to have a hunger, to improve. But if you're about relationships, then you're going to help players and buy in. Not only that, I'm big with my staff is, we got to quote, build our army. And so when you're walking across campus to check a class, are you actually saying hello to some random person that you're walking by? Because you never know when that person's gonna just do. We always just be normal. I just talk to my guys all the time. Let's just be normal. And so when we're going across campus for a meeting or things like that, I want you to say hello to as many people as you can say hello to. True story. At Wofford, we recruited Fletcher McGee, who's now the 3-point all-time shooter in NCAA history. You never know who's going to help you. When we took Fletcher McGee through the cafeteria at Wofford, 2 cafeteria workers came out behind the serving station. And they told Fletcher's parents that as coaches, we talk to them every day. And if they had a child, they would want them to play for Mike Young and us. And the parents just couldn't get over that because it was just such a genuine, real thing. Now, we truly talk to those people every day. And because we ate in the cafeteria every day. And so you got to be relationship driven. You never know who it's going to be that's going to put you over the top or just help you on campus. But once again, that shouldn't be just be normal, but going across campus and I always tell our players, what if the president of the university walked in our locker room right now? We have that up. What if the president of the university just walked in right now and saw your freaking mess in your locker? But I think that if you got guys that are relationship driven, you're not only going to have relationships on campus, which are sometimes your most important ones. I want guys that just really have a great attention to detail. And, I'm big on, guys that just have emotional intelligence. And I think when you have emotional intelligence, you dig into the details, and details are critical. But also just in recruiting or coaching, but guys that are just, really, they're worried about the details. That's something that they don't want to misspell something to an email to somebody on campus. They don't want to, when a player comes in their office, they don't want to not be prepared about the watch film. So that stuff's, perception becomes reality a little bit in those regards. And then, lastly, I want guys that are still developing, right? Guys like yourself that are on these things wanting to get better. Like, I want coaches that are hungry and humble. I'm not going to hire a guy to give me some zone defense or things like that, or if that's great, if he's got, but I want guys that are hungry and humble, that have a growth mindset, and they're ongoing learners, that don't have I don't have all the answers. I'm not. I always tell our players, I'm not perfect. I'm gonna make mistakes. I don't want them to be perfect, and so no one's perfect. I don't want my staff to be perfect, but I want them to still, develop. I think in 2020, when I was getting up in coaching, there wasn't as many resources online as there is now. And so you really had to we didn't have things like we're doing right now. You had to drive 2 or 3 hours and sit to a clinic and pay money. And so on YouTube, it's amazing what stuff's on YouTube now. And so in 2020, there's really no excuses, in my opinion, to not be well-rounded as a coach and learn. And so, I've, during this quarantine, I've given each of my staff member a project, and I want them to learn. I want them to do stuff like we're doing right now. And, but I want guys that have a growth mindset and ongoing learner. Dave, I hope that, I don't know, I'd say you mentioned doing questions at the end, and I apologize, I went over my time. Is that, I'm ready to listen to Jonas and Duane so I can learn something, but what is that good for you?
Oh, absolutely. That was perfect. And obviously, if anyone has any questions they want to ask Coach Kerns, raise your hand or just, chime in.
Coach Kern, Kareem Brown here from Niagara County. How often do you give your assistants criticism on what you think they can do better?
Yeah, very good question. One thing I will never, ever do is I will never, ever show up an assistant in front of the team, ever. And so I will never, ever criticize them publicly, ever. Even if they jack something up in a walkthrough. And I give them a lot of ownership now. Like, I let our assistants run film sessions. I want running drills. I want that. I don't want our team hearing my voice all the time. They hear it enough. And so in the short term, I would pull them in after practice. Hey, listen, I think you got to say, I don't know, but immediately, I don't let things linger. We always say we're a program of truth, and to our players or staff. But hey, listen, I want them to do the same. I want them to I want to have a good relationship with our staff, and I feel like we do, where they can come in and say, hey, coach, I think you went a little too hard at that kid today, or hey, coach, I think I don't think they heard you. Like, I want them to have the same type of criticism towards me. I just want to win. And so, but I have, on paper, some things that I want our staff that I evaluate them with. And I usually meet with them twice a year. I also meet with them to hey, tell me your goals. I want guys that want to be head coaches. I want them to think that way. And I encourage you, if you haven't sat down with your boss and tell them you want to be a head coach, you need to do that. I working for Mike Young, eventually I had to do that. You can't just assume that he thinks you want to be a head coach. And so I had to go down and sit down with Mike Young and say, hey, coach, I really want to try to become a head coach and this and this. So he knew that. And so I actually wish I would have done it sooner. But I hope, Kareem, that answers your question. But I would say twice a year we really sit down and evaluate things. And I try to make it more of a positive. But if there's something in the immediate, that certainly right away, I don't let the elephant sit in the room around here.
Coach Kerns, Jonathan Maddox, Morehead State. Talk about your take the stairs philosophy. Obviously, I know that's something that you pride yourself in. How did you come up with that? How did you maintain that while you were at Presbyterian and then at App State?
Yeah, I think that I read a book, Take the Stairs by Rory Baden, and it just made a lot of sense to me. I try to read a lot. And so as you guys are developing your philosophy to become a head coach, every good program's got a brand, and some ADs or presidents are going to ask you that. Hey, what's your program going to be about? The book talks about mostly in a quick version, just how, most people in life want it easy. Most people are going to take the escalator, the elevator. Most people are going to take a diet pill. Most people are going to go try to play a lottery ticket. Like, at the end of the day, but it's a mindset, and I try to, certainly I talk with our team about it. I think that just any good organization has some sort of internal brand. And I thought that once I became the head coach of Presbyterian, it kind of caught on a little bit with our team, most importantly. And certainly we just carried it on here and fans. And it's a way to kind of brand your program with fan base and things like, I did a Zoom to the Hall of Fame banquet at App State this past Saturday, and a guy on his Zoom flashed up, take the stairs, signed to me. And so, like, I never met the guy before. And so you just never know when guys, becomes catchy and things like that. But that was the philosophy behind it, Jonathan.
Coach Kerns, Duane Simpkins here. Your first head coaching job, what were some of the things that, if you had a time machine, you could go back 5 years prior and say, hey, I should have worked on this, this, and this to prepare myself even better for being in this present situation? What would one or two or three of those things be?
Duane, that's a good question. I didn't want to become a head coach just to be one. I wanted to be, so I felt like I had a plan. You never know when ADs or people are going to read that. And so, in fact, at Presbyterian, the president told me he read it front to cover. And so when I got the head job, I actually had that on my desk, and I actually followed it first 10 days, first 30 days. But looking back on it, one thing that I probably would have done differently, I think you got to learn institutional rules when you get to a place. And so, like, Duane, I'll ask you this. If you sign a junior college kid at George Mason, does their GPA start over, or do they transfer in with it?
Well, we haven't had, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I guess my point is, like, that question, those kind of questions are different at every institution.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I wish I would have learned institutional rules a little bit more. And so when I got to App State, it's one of the very first things I did is try to learn stuff like that. Because if you would have asked me that question at Wofford, I would have had no clue.
Right.
We didn't recruit junior college kids.
Right.
So I'm like, man, I don't know how, I don't know. I don't know at Wofford. I didn't know what GPA, I assume it transferred. I didn't know. And so when I got to Presbyterian, I didn't know either. And so when you get to a place, you try to, you know, you're trying to just figure it out, piece it out. Hey, and so that's a one you probably don't hear often, but when you get your head coaching job, every school's different. Some schools that's just an example, but like, and then, you know, this was something I didn't, I did at both places. I don't know if I might have made a mistake, but I didn't watch film on any of the players. And you're probably like, what the hell are you doing? What, you're out of your mind? And I felt like that if I watched film on, I took over just, you never know what situation you're going to take over, but I took over 2 programs that had 8 straight losing seasons and 14 straight. And so I felt like that I needed to give everybody a fresh start. And you're probably like, what in the world you probably need to get, but like what it did was, it didn't cloud my mind. It didn't clutter my mind. And I thought to myself, these kids might actually be better than they are, but it's just the situation. And in a way, I'm really glad I did that. But in a way, I wish maybe I would have watched a little bit with that mindset. But honest to goodness, I never did. One time at Presbyterian, I had it pulled up on Synergy and I X'd out of it because I told myself, listen, you're not going to do it. Now my staff did. My staff did watch film. But what it did, for example, inherited a point guard, a 5'9" point guard at Presbyterian that had made 3 threes in his first 2 years and played a lot. He was shooting 13% from 3. And his last 2 years, he shot over 30%, made 47 threes. It was just like, because I didn't give him, he's not a shooter. Like, I didn't know what he was. And so they knew that. They knew that when I got on the court with him stuff, they knew, like, this guy's got no idea who I am. I got a fresh start. And so I did the same thing here. I don't know, like I said, I don't know if it was good or bad, but I do think that you gotta, that's something to look at when do you do that? Do you not?
Jonas Hayes, Xavier University. I got a question for you. All right. So when you were making your transition to become a head coach while you were an assistant, how did you prepare for that without it impacting your job as an assistant? The very last couple of years before you got that head job. All right. How did you prepare for that without it impacting your current assistant spot?
Jonas, I think that's a very good question. And, I did set aside like 1 hour a week for just kind of what I called I got a big notebook on my desk and I called it just professional development. Mm-hmm. So I just try to set aside 1 hour a week, whether it was 10 minutes a day to call or text someone. I talked to my staff and about this too. I said, you have to understand the business you're in. You got to understand how it works. I might take 10 minutes and just reach out to a search firm, send them a text. Do what we're doing right now. Call somebody and say, hey man, what did you do? To me, that's professional development. And so I did try to set aside, I think you got to do that. I mean, like, I encourage my staff to do that. I've encouraged my staff right now to take this time to get their book ready, to develop. I got my philosophy on paper when my daughter was born. And so you're up all night and I just started typing away. And so that was when I did that. But, I think that you do need to, you can't take 4 hours of that, obviously.
That's right.
But I do think you need, whether it was 10 minutes a day or whatever, you need to do that for yourself, in my opinion. And that's what I did. And I don't know if it, I guess it didn't hurt, but that's kind of what I did. But I think that's a very good question, and I think that's certainly got to be some balance with that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else got anything for Coach Kerns?
Well, I appreciate Dave. He's a good friend, and I appreciate everybody. Like I've I've always, as a head coach now, I hope to be a head coach. I mean, shoot, I might be back in as an assistant here. I mean, shoot, this is a tough profession, but I always keep a little thing in my phone of assistant coaches that, and so I look forward to listening to Jonas and Duane, and learning some things too, but I appreciate your all's time and I hope that some sort of benefit to you.
Hey, Dave, I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Coach Kerns, you talked about, your assistants having a mindset to continue to get better. What were some things that some of the guys you work for that, when they poured into you, how did they help you get better as an assistant?
Yeah, and so it's interesting because, Mike Young was a guy I was with for 7 years, and he'd worked at the same school for 30 years. And so I used to joke with him and say, hey, listen, you can't get another job. How in the world do you expect, how are you going to get me another, job, because, and so, I think that he didn't know the profession. He didn't know search firms. He didn't know he had no. And so we started kind of learning it together, kind of crazy enough. I worked for Kerry Keating out west, and he was good about that as far as pulling you in a couple of times a year and trying to grow and do some things for you. Like I've tried to, my time right now, I've tried to reach out to people and get my staff on some panels and do some stuff. Have people have my assistant on. I want them to do that kind of stuff. But interesting question. But Mike Young's like the best guy in the world, man. He's like, and he's obviously a terrific coach, but like, he wasn't the best guy to learn from this side of it. And so I almost had to kind of figure it out on my own a little bit. And to Jonas's question, kind of I knew I had to do that being with him. Like that wasn't a strength of his. Hey man, this is what you got to do. He'd been at the same school for 30 years. And so I knew I had to take some time out of myself, quote unquote, kind of just figure it out.
Anyone else got any last questions for Coach Kerns?
Yeah, I have a question if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Hey, Coach Kerns, Devonta, assistant coach at Spalding in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
And what are some of your core beliefs in scouting? Do you believe in less is more? Do you try to go into all of the details? What are some of your beliefs in that area?
Yeah. I think less is more. Okay. We don't give our players any type of, and I'm not saying whatever we do is right. Okay. But we don't give our players any type of hard copy. It's all visual. I've tried to study what makes this generation learn. Man, I tell you, it's interesting. All right. It's really interesting how this generation learns. It's not by handing them a piece of paper and letting them read and things. And so everything is visual. Everything is up on a screen. Everything is and sometimes it's kind of small group where they feel a little bit more comfortable. But we also try to come up with creative ways with scouting reports, dividing the team in two, playing Jeopardy, Wheel of Fortune, Family Feud. We've done all that, and the winning team gets some, keeps their phones a little bit longer or something like that. But like, that's how they quote learn. And so, and we've done some of that, but we don't put a guy up on the screen and say these are the 8 things he does well. That's just too much. It's overload. And so as coaches, we'll know, we feel like attention to detail, but your players can only handle so much. And I think that you've got to kind of learn your team and see what they can handle. But we don't, we try to have them remember, we hope them to remember one thing about each player, one thing. But if you think that you can play on Thursday and then play again on Saturday and have your players know what you're doing and then know 3 or 4 things about their whole team, like, I think that's mind explosion. And so I hope that answers your question, but I do think less is more, especially for us and for me too, sometimes too. Like, I'm going to watch a lot of film because I enjoy it. And as a staff, we staff scout a lot. So we have a person that's in charge of it, but like, we always watch it together, the edit, we always watch, and so we all make decisions together. And so we're all on the same page at least. But golly, asking an 18 to 22-year-old kid to know 4 or 5 things about a player or anything like that, I think's a little much, personally.
Anyone else? Shoot, DK, I appreciate you, brother. Really
Appreciate
good
you,
stuff. Yep. Thank you again, and obviously don't take your time lightly. So thank you. Next up, we're going to head to Coach Duane Simpkins at George Mason. Obviously gotten to know Coach Simpkins the past few years through recruiting and just getting to know him as a person. And obviously he's got a really unique journey, and obviously I'm going to let him get into that. But I'm really excited for Coach Simpkins to share his journey. So without further ado, Coach Duane Simpkins.
Well, good morning, gentlemen. Appreciate you, David, for allowing me to come on and speak, man. This is really fun. I know during this time, it's no fun when you're cooped in the house with your kids, and I got a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, so I'm a little blessed in that perspective from the standpoint that they're not 8 and 4, so I feel for some of you guys who do have the babies running around the house. I know it's tough, but this has been a great opportunity, man, to expand my knowledge of the game, to meet different people. I think anytime you have some catastrophic event or some adversity, I think it's always important to realize that there's a silver lining in it. And I think this is a huge one. I'm getting a chance to steal all kinds of ideas. I'm meeting different guys from different parts of the country. So I'm also able to go back and go down memory lane. Dustin was an assistant at Wofford when I first got the job at UNC Greensboro with Wes Miller. And man, I'm coming from the year before I was the director of operations at Towson. And before that, I spent 6 years as a high school coach. So I was pretty much my first year as an assistant. And if you could imagine my first year, the two of the teams that I had to scout, and along with everybody else in the Southern Conference, was Wofford and Mike Young. And if you know his offense and some of the things that they do, my head was exploding. It's my first year of doing scouts and everything. And then I had Bob Hoffman and Mercer and all the stuff that they did. Man, you talking about your head exploded. They had a guy named Carl Cochran. They were running some beautiful misdirection stuff for. I'm going to get the playbook from him, man. But I just had to touch on that because Dustin and those guys did a hell of a job. I really respected those guys and the way they conducted their business. And Mike Young was one of my favorite coaches to interact with off the court and everything. So Dustin, best of luck to you guys, man. And I know you guys are going to do some great things. Fellas, pretty much what I wanted to do, man, I was just speaking with David and like, hey, what do you want me to talk about? We're not going to do X's and O's and everything. I thought there would be some value in talking about my journey from playing to coaching. And I think that as I articulate that journey, I will go back and point to certain things that helped me become the person that I am, the dad that I am, the coach that I am, and what drives me. So one of the things that has really stood out on some of these Zoom calls and interacting with different guys who are, whether they're head coaches of G Leagues or they're the associate head coach of this NBA team or assistant coach here, there is no certain blueprint for getting to A, B, C, D. I mean, it's a winding road. You have no idea. I was on a Zoom call last week with a guy who's a head coach in the G League, and his intention, he just wanted to be an assistant coach in Division I basketball. That was his ultimate goal. And his route took him here. He connected with this person, that's this person. Next thing you know, he's working out NBA players in the summertime. And then the following year, he's in Vegas and he's being presented with an opportunity to be a head coach for a G League team. So if there's anything that I will impress upon you before I get into this, man, is that there is no certain route for quote unquote success, for going from point A to point B to point C. There's no blueprint. So with that being said, man, I'll give you a little bit about my background. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. I spent my first 9 years in Southeast D.C., and my mom passed away when I was 9 years old of breast cancer. And if you know anything about the inner city, and in particular D.C. this is 1983, this is the height of the crack epidemic. And now my dad is here with a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old trying to figure out how he's going to raise both of them. We had a big family, so they're all around D.C. and in Maryland. But he took it upon himself to say, you know what, I'm going to raise my kids my own. And my aunts and uncles all asked to take us and everything. He's like, no, we're going to figure it out. So 2 years later, he gets the insurance money, and we move out to PG County. And as a 9, 10-year, 11-year-old at the time who's been born and raised in D.C., we're looking at going to Fort Washington, Maryland, which is only 15, 20 minutes from Southeast. But at the time, it seemed like this was a completely different state. So we go to move out to Maryland. I embraced basketball. I remember this like it was yesterday. The day that I found out my mom had passed, we had practice that day. And I was like, I want to go to practice. Like, for me, that has always been a safe haven for me, no matter what's going on. I want to be involved around basketball. So fast forward, playing boys club ball and everything, I ended up going to DeMatha High School. Coach Morgan Wooten, who, in my opinion, is the best coach that I've ever had. And I've been blessed. I've been blessed to be coached by 2 Hall of Fame coaches, and Gary Williams at DeMatha, and then I moved on to Maryland, where I was with Gary Williams, Morgan Wooten, Gary Williams. At DeMatha, I was very fortunate. We were a top 25 team my junior, senior year. We went undefeated my junior year. I was selected to the McDonald's All-American game in 1992. And just a quick note about that, just adversity. You're going to hear me talk about that quite a bit. I remember going to my senior year at DeMatha, there was the NABC camp. It's the top 100 players, Nike camp. Wasn't 250, 300, it's top 100 players. Like, you show up, you better be ready to play. And I remember just hearing about this dude named Jason Kidd. And at the time, they say, I'm the second best point guard behind Jason Kidd. I'm like, this wasn't like now where you can pull up video instantly and see a guy and everything. And in my mind, I'm like, this dude is supposed to be 6'4", almost 200 pounds. There's no way that he's quicker than me. There's no way that he's going to be able to do some of the things that I can do. And I thought I was pretty good. And we faced each other in Nike camp. It's the first time that I was like struggling getting the basketball over half court. Like, it was obvious, like, this dude was he was special. I mean, he could pass it. He can handle the ball. He pushed the ball down your throat on the fast break. But that was the first time that I had faced a point guard where afterwards I went in my room and looked in the mirror and was like, that dude is better than me. Like, it was the first time. And it was like humbling, the most humbling experience I had at that point. And then fast forward, we're 2 weeks from then. We play in the Nike National Championship. Is in Vegas. First year they had it. Now, mind you, I got my ass kicked by Jason Kidd that week. I remember going home and all the drills that I did, and I love drills. I used to just like, that's where I grew, just like really honing my skills and just like get in front of like an imaginary defender. And I remember my imaginary defender moving forward was Jason Kidd, like every single time. And 2 weeks later, here we go. We got 7 players. We go out to Vegas. We run the whole tournament. We face Jason Kidd's team in the championship. And like, this is a huge game. Bill Walton is actually doing the game for a cable station out there. All the coaches are there and everything. And I outplayed Jason Kidd, 25, 5, and 5. I remember that stat line like it was yesterday. But I bring all that up to say is that experience right there for me, I take that with me every single day, because no matter what situation I'm in, there's always going to be someone or some team that is going to be quote unquote bigger, better, stronger. Going back to the drawing board, that's where I get my juices flowing. You know, I used to love watching the Rocky movies. It was cool to see him knock out Apollo Creed or whoever, but I loved all the images and the videos of, you know, Rocky pounding the meat in the meat factory and running the hills and everything. Like the process. That is the thing that I get the most fun out of. I'll fast forward. I go to Maryland. I get there. We are a terrible team. My freshman year, we're getting our heads pounded. We finished last in the ACC. We have a good group of young players that are with me. The following year, we're picked to finish next to last. In that year, we bring in a guy named Joe Smith and Keith Booth. I had played AAU ball with Keith, so I knew how good Keith was. Nobody knew how good Joe was. Anybody that could tell you that they knew how good Joe was, they're lying to you. But we thought Joe was pretty good. But we fast forward, we played Georgetown the very first game of the season. They're ranked like number 13 in the country. Again, we're picked to finish next to last in the ACC. We go out and we beat Georgetown on national TV. And from there, we took off. During my time there, we actually went to the NCAA tournament 3 different times. We went to the Sweet 16 in back-to-back years. And I'm proud to say that I was a part of that team that helped turn the program around and get us to the point where like we're potentially winning national championships and everything. So being a part of a program, if I could go back a little bit from that, being a part of a program and recognizing that it's not just about you, you know, I feel really, really great sense of pride that I have a legacy at the University of Maryland, not necessarily from being one of the great players, but being a part of a great team that helped bring the program back. And I think sometimes as assistant coaches, as coaches in general, we all want to take the next step. We want to, you know, help take care of our family from a financial perspective and things like that. I think one of the things that you always want to try to really embrace is like, hey, am I doing enough to leave a mark on a positive legacy where I am? And whether that's I'm going to be there for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it doesn't matter. But like, I'm always of the mindset that that's got to be your mindset. Leave a legacy. So I go on from Maryland. I go overseas to play basketball for 3 years. Play in France and play in Belgium. And then my daughter is born. And at the time, the other thing that was really big on me, I told myself, I'm going to give myself 2 or 3 years time. I'm going to make the NBA. And I had been working my tail off to put myself in position physically. I knew I wasn't physically ready coming out of college. I just didn't think so. But I felt I was really ready. I go and I play pro ball for a few years. And that year in 98 that I decided it was either NBA or bust for me. I said, if I don't make the NBA, then I'm not playing basketball anymore. Well, that was the year they had the lockout. And I didn't get a chance to play in the summertime and, you know, make it to the CBA and all that stuff because that stuff just wasn't happening. So I stopped playing for 3 years. And during that period, I actually went and I was the assistant coach at DeMatha for the JV team. Coach Wooten was there and said, hey, I want you to work with our young guys. I was doing a ton of workouts on the side. And then the following year, Joe Wooten, his son, got the head coaching job at Bishop O'Connell here in Northern Virginia. And Coach Wooten said, hey, Duane, if you want to help me, go help Joe start the program. So I went over there with Joe for a year, helped him start the program. And this was a critical part for me because this helped me from the skill development standpoint and a teaching standpoint. Once I got done playing, I knew at some point in time it wasn't all the way out of my system. And so I coached with Joe that following year and I said, hey, man, this is my last year. I'm going back to playing. So I get on the horn with my agent. My agent makes phone calls and everything. And the guys in Europe like, hey, he was a really good player, but that was 3 years ago. So my agent was like, hey, man, like you got to go back and start from the bottom. You got to go. I'm going to get you in the ABA, the USBL and everything. So fast forward, I'm working out. And, you know, if you know anything, man, about the DC area, I mean, they just had the documentary in PG County. There was a gym called Run and Shoot. And it was like at certain times of the day on certain courts, you know, you had pros, you had big time college players, dudes play overseas. And like, I was invited obviously to play and everything. And at that time, my timing wasn't right. I hadn't gotten my strength back. I was just off kilter. But during that time, it made me realize like I wasn't as fast as those guys yet. It made me slow down. It made me take better account of angles, changing speed. I wasn't just using just my God-given abilities in terms of my speed and quickness. And it helped me from a coaching standpoint, because now these are some of the same things that I actually try to impart on the guys that I work with right now. Whether you're a guard, whether you're a forward, slowing down, visualizing the defense, not seeing your primary defender all the time. What is a secondary defender? That guy's going to determine what that ball screen action should look like, things like that. But I thought for me, that was a very critical time because it helped me gain perspective of how to look at the game of basketball as opposed to just trying to play the game. And I thought I grew a ton during that time. The other thing I will admit to during that time, I had a coach that had me in the USBL, and I didn't know who he was at the time, but his name was Lionel Hollins. And 2 years later, he was going to end up being an NBA coach, head coach. He had been an assistant for a number of years. Lionel Hollins is the best X's and O's coach that I've ever been around, and it's not even close. This dude would, during the timeout, would draw up a play. And obviously, we've heard about guys that draw up plays that, that you guys haven't worked on and everything. He took it to another level. He would actually draw up certain plays because he knew the certain matchups that guys had going into that particular possession. And the things that he would do, man, and I would pick his brain on some of the bus rides and everything. And I had a tremendous 2 or 3 month period learning from guys like that. If I could take a step back, I know I've talked about a lot, and it's related to my journey and everything else. But one of the things that I will point out to you is along your journey, you're going to have different people, man, that are placed in your life. I believe I'm a God-fearing man. I believe it's by God. But there is a reason why I would stop playing when I stopped playing. There was a reason why I went back to start playing again when I did. I got a chance to come across a highly intellectually stimulating basketball mind in Lionel Hollins. Still know him to this day. He was placed in my life at that particular time for a reason. And I would just encourage you guys that as you do go through your process, take stock of those times when it's pretty much God tapping you on the shoulder and say, hey, dummy, hey, listen to this. Look right here. Look at this right here. And this is not all things that you've done on your own. These are things that are strategically placed in your life at particular times. And I'll be the first one to say, it's not always going to be perfect for you. There are going to be certain things that they're not going to work out. They're not going to work out in your favor. And I'll talk about that a little bit as I continue to talk about my journey. So I get done playing. And one last thing before I go to my coaching, my very last year playing, I'm playing in the USBL, and my agent saying, hey man, like you're playing really well and everything. I was pissed off because I was up for a spot for the Memphis Grizzlies summer league team, and it was between myself and another guy who was playing in the USBL, but he was a bigger guard. He was 6'4", and my agent called me. I remember it being a USBL game. It was the semifinal game in Salina, Kansas. And I'm at breakfast, and he calls me. He says, hey, man, like that last spot is going to the other guard, man. And we're actually going to play them in like 4 or 5 hours. And I'm at the table, and I'm crushed. I'm like in tears and everything. And I'm like, all right. I go out that game, and I've never played like this possessed in all my life. When I had like a triple double, I had like 49, 11, and 10, a game with the 2 overtimes. And so after the game, he's like, look, man, the Grizzlies want to bring you in. I'm like, all right, cool. And he said, well, the G League, this is the first thing, the D League was going to be coming on board in the fall. He said, hey man, like you got 2 options. If things work out with the Grizzlies, obviously you stay there. But if not, you got a fallback option with the D League thing. And I'm like, I don't even think about the D League thing, man. We're gonna make this thing work. So I go to camp, I'm playing well and everything. Well, during that time, an offer comes from a team in Italy, in Milan. And at the time, I'm like, man, I got a decision to make. Like, I got to take this either within the next week or 2, or I got to say, you know what, I'm all in on this whole thing with the Grizzlies. And at the time, I was just engaged to my wife. She had been holding things down while I'm going through this whole process of not making any money for 6, 7 months and everything. And I said, you know what, man, we're getting married in the fall. I got to go make this money. My decision was based on specifically money at that point in time. I'm like, this is The contract was 3 times ever made in any contract in a year in Europe. And I was like, I'm going to make this decision. And in retrospect, it was because of money. Don't make decisions over money. Now, I'm not saying that if I had stayed, I would have made a D-League team or anything like that. I very well may have. But at that time, my decision was based solely on how much money I could make in this calendar year. And that's something I try not to go back and look at certain things and have regrets on them. But at the same time, I do try to take stock of some of the decisions that I've made and say, hey, what could have been done differently? Did you make that decision based on what's in your heart? So if I could share that, don't make a decision based on money. I know sometimes it sounds good in theory, sounds cliche, but don't make decisions based on money. So moving forward, I'm actually I get done playing overseas. My body's breaking down. I know eventually I want to get into coaching. I finished up my degree. I was still a semester short at the University of Maryland. And once I'm done, I actually get the head coaching job at Sitwell Friends in DC. The Obama kids had just graduated from there. Anybody that knows anything about independent private schools in DC, Sitwell Friends is a top-notch school. Eric Singletary, who's there right now, has done a hell of a job. Josh Hart, Sadiq Bey is going to be a first-round pick this year. I didn't have those players when I got there. That's for damn sure. But I get there, and it taught me how to coach because here I am. I'm inheriting some guys. They can't walk and chew bubble gum at the same time, to be honest with you. Great kids. They're willing to run through a wall for me, and it made me coach. I didn't have guys that I could just roll out and say, hey, we're going to run ball screen motion and everything. And as a coach, and it's funny, talking to Dustin, hearing him talking, just hearing different coaches who are in their first time being head coaches, we all have certain things that we hold on to and say, you know what, if and when that day does come, I'm going to do this with my offense, do that with my offense. Fellas, I'm telling you, once you get somewhere, this is my opinion, Dustin may feel differently, but once you get somewhere, yes, you do have your long-term goals of what that program looks like. But in order to be able to survive and keep your head above water and give your guys somewhat of a fighting chance, you may have to step back from some of the things that you always want to be about. I never wanted to run the flex. I hated running the flex at Maryland with Gary Williams. I was like, man, let us just play. I knew that from the system that I played in, I felt it was too restrictive. I knew that for my guys, as much as I did not want to be a flex coach, for my guys, it was going to be the best chance that we would have at success. If put guys in certain spots, there were certain movements that were already laid out, and there was no improvising, no ball handling, anything else. We lost in the championship my first year. My second year, we went undefeated. It's the first time in the school's history they actually went undefeated, and the first time in 50 years they had won a championship. I felt really proud about the work that we did there. And from there, I got the job at St. Albans School, which is just down the road, another independent private school, high quality academics, high net worth, all of that stuff. But it was an all boys institution. I get there and I'm actually struggling trying to get this program off the ground. But again, I stayed firm to some of the things I really believed in, which is like, hey, establishing your culture, it's going to take a little bit longer than you think. Fight through it, fight through it, fight through it. It made me a much better coach. I want to fast forward to my college journey, my first job coming out. And this is something, fellas, I would always take. I tell people all the time. I had spent 6 years as a head coach in high school. And initially, when I knew I wanted to get into college coaching, I was not going to make this move until my wife was on board. And I knew the first couple of years she was not there. Over the course of time, she became more on board. And I said, you know what, I'm going to start trying to hit this thing hard. Started going to the NCAA tournament and all that stuff. And it took me 3 years for someone to give me a shot. Now, in my mind as a quote unquote player, a scholarship player, I'm saying, hey man, I was a McDonald's All-American. I played high Division I basketball. I played overseas in Europe and everything. None of that mattered. None of that mattered. It took for me to get into a situation where like I had to fight for a job that I wanted. Pat Scarry, who got the job at Towson, he got the job like on let's say it was a Monday. And on Wednesday, he was having his press conference. I sent him an email the day that I heard he got the job. And surprisingly, he responded that night and said, hey, thanks. I appreciate it. Look forward to catching up. I'm like, all right. It was cool enough that he reached out. I knew the press conference is like on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Well, I took off work that day and I drove up there. And when he gets off the stage after giving his speech and everything, I walk up behind him, shake his hand, say, "Hey, Coach, Duane Simpkins." And he was just like, "Damn, I wasn't expecting you to be here." And I was like, it took for me to get to that point to put the ego aside and say, I've got to go pursue what I want. And that's no different from what you guys are going to be, situations that you're going to be put forth and put in front of you. No matter what your past resume said, whether you were a former Division I player, whether you were an overseas player, NBA player, former Division I head coach, assistant coach, like, you still got to pursue what you want. And you've got to pursue it as if like that person doesn't know who you are. You have no resume. You've got to go attack it. So I get the job at Towson. I'm there for 1 year, director of operations. I didn't like it initially because it was like, man, I've got to do all of this stuff and it doesn't relate to basketball. But that right there has given me so much of an education for like the day that I am a head coach. I know what that stuff looks like because I've been through it. I remember talking to Jay Wright one time, and he said the best thing that he ever did, he was a assistant manager, he was a head manager, he was a director of operations, a film dude, he was an assistant coach. He was like, Duane, I know what this stuff looks like. I know what the responsibilities of these guys are. And I took that with me. I take that with me to this day. I had a notebook that I started when I was at Towson about all the little things that I felt made this job hard and the things that I felt made this the job at Towson hard in particular. And I also tweaked it a little bit. I would talk to different guys, different ops guys, say, hey man, like, how do you guys do your buses? How do you guys do your, how do you order your scheduling for your chart, for your flights and things like that? And I would just keep a running tally, man. I have a notebook now of like, and granted, every situation is going to be different, from a high major institution to a mid major to a quote unquote low major. Everybody's budget's going to be different, but I have some understanding of what that stuff looks like simply because I was a director of operations for a year. Fast forward, I'm at UNC Greensboro. I get the job the following year. Wes Miller, I had never met him before. Pat Scurry was helpful. Keith Stevens at Team Takeover. I remember it was in New Orleans that year. And I don't know if Keith got word that I was going for the job, but Keith calls me and say, hey man, you want this UNCG job? I'm like, yeah, I'm supposed to meet with the guy tomorrow. He's like, all right, cool. I'm gonna try to reach out too. So long story short, those guys reached out, but it was great. I sit down with Wes, and Wes and I were having coffee. I think it was a Thursday I get down there. We have coffee for about an hour. And when we're talking, it's obvious that there's some kind of connection. And the biggest connection was my high school coach, Morgan Wooten, and Dean Smith from Carolina, who Roy Williams reveres, Wes reveres Roy Williams. There's this connection of like ideas, philosophies. It's like lockstep. We just knew like, damn, there's something here. I get a call from Wes the next morning. Hey man, you trying to do coffee again at 1 o'clock? I'm like, oh shit, I think we're on to something here. So long story short, I get the job, get down there, and we got to fill 7 scholarships. And this is my first time on the road. And the best thing for me at the time, I'm a big family guy. The best thing for me was that my family was still in Maryland. Man, I was in that damn office every day, every night, like for about 3 months, like trying to put this class together. And it really opened my eyes. I worked for 2 coaches, both Pat Scurry and him. They were both first-time head coaches. Working with a first-time head coach, fellas, is different than somebody who already has their stuff established. I will tell you that, and I learned a ton from Wes. I learned a ton from Pat Scurry. But we put together a 7-man class, and that class was the foundation for Wes and those guys getting to the NCAA tournament 2 years ago. That's another thing about leaving a legacy. I really felt like I spent a ton of time helping put that class together and helping those guys succeed. And lastly, I'm here at George Mason now. I've just completed my 5th year. We had a chance to be pretty good. We started off 11-2 this year. Our returning player breaks his foot. The guy who was standing in his place catches pneumonia. We struggled in the conference, but we're doing some good things here, and we're looking forward to next year putting out another good team. One last thing that I will say, man, is you got to run your own race. I know I've talked about that a little bit. You can't look to the left and right and see different guys getting different jobs and everything. I would encourage you guys to just simply run your own race. As I told you, man, I think God places different people in your path at certain times so that you can, one, touch other people. I think this is big. Don't forget about why you got into this job. I got into this job, man. I'm big on process. I love the grind of like day to day and seeing the finished product, but I really embrace the day to day. And while you do that day to day, I just feel it's really important, man. Me as an African American male, the predominant number of kids that I work with, they look like me and they talk like me. There's certain experiences that I can share with them that they can't get from other people. Let's just call it what it is. But I can't forget all of that for the simple fact that I want to help us win basketball games. You can do both. It's possible. I know you can do both. You can teach guys on the court. You can teach guys off the court. Share with those guys your experiences, the pluses, the minuses. I talk to our guys all the time. Hey, you guys go overseas, man. Don't blow your damn money. I can talk to them about how I had to get a part-time job when I got done playing because I did some dumb things with my money. You know, I can talk to those guys. So share with them, be open and honest with them, be transparent. That is why we're here. We're not here just for X's and O's and trying to help them become better basketball players. We're here to help them become better men, and for the females here on the call, to help them become better women as well. I know that's a lot, man, but I wanted to share all that stuff, and I think that leads to some of the things that we can open up and have some discussions about. So any questions that you guys may have, feel free.
Coach Warren, go ahead.
Hey, Duane, two quick questions. One, you mentioned Morgan Wooten. I think a lot of people know Morgan Wooten, legendary. You had a connection with Wes Miller, Morgan, Dean Smith. First question is, for those who don't have that powerful enough connection, what else do you recommend? First question. And because you were such a high-level player, playing at DeMatha on a national stage. Again, a lot of people don't know you started as a freshman in high school. Not a lot of people do that. And then you went to University of Maryland in the ACC. Again, high-level player. How do you get your players to relate to your work ethic? Because there aren't a lot of kids that start as ninth graders. There aren't a lot of kids that go right into the ACC and play right away.
Yeah. The first part of your question, Cliff, great question. How can you make that connection? I've had some situations. I've applied for I went and interviewed for 2 head coaching jobs, and it's both on the assistant coaching side and head coaching side. I would say that if you try to make a connection with someone and you don't have a already built-in connection, research, man. Research. There's a ton of information that you can gather from not only just written articles about guys. You pull up certain post game interviews with certain coaches and everything. You'll start to realize what they're about, what things they that may turn them off, and then obviously, man, like the network that we're developing right now, get on the phone and call different people who are like, hey, I know that hey man, Brian, I know that your guy actually worked with Wes's old guy. Like, anything that you can share with me, maybe you have to find something and actually do the work, man, and make notes of it to make that kind of common connection and everything that you can bring to the table to kind of help bring you together, if that makes sense, Cliff. The second part of your question, give me that second part again.
I was talking about your high school career, college career. You were a starter in the 9th grade at DeMatha, played at a high level, and
motivating,
then at Maryland,
yeah,
playing at a high level. How do you get your kids to relate to your work ethic?
Man, well, first, you got to touch those guys. I'm a firm believer, like, I can have you come out and do these drills and everything, man, but you're not going to really feel my passion for it until you know who I am and I know who you are. So I think first and foremost is establishing a relationship with those guys on and off the court, letting them know that I want you to become great as well. I'm not one that's going to pull up my YouTube videos and everything. I'm just not going to do it. But if I show my enthusiasm for it, if I show that I'm going above and beyond, for instance, I got 2 point guards that I'm in charge of. I think these guys can be really, really good. Not only are we watching film of their games right now from last year in certain ball screen situations. All right, now we're going to watch some Steve Nash stuff. I think Steve Nash is one of the best at playing ball screens. some of these guys, one guy likes John Morant. Okay, I'm going to pull up John Morant stuff. Everybody knows what John Morant looks like right now. I went back 2 or 3 years ago to pull up stuff from John Morant when he was 155, 160 pounds. Like, that's taking things to the next level to help really get on the same level with these guys and let them know, I want you to be great as well. But in terms, Cliff, of me like trying to yell at them, hey, you got to play harder and everything. I mean, I try not to recruit guys like that. That's for damn sure. If I know that you don't have a work ethic, it's going to be obvious the first couple of times I see you in practice. So I try to stay away from guys to begin with on that front. But once they're there, man, I just try to pour into them and let them know that I do care about how good they want to be, and then like we actually get to work at it.
Got it. Thank you.
Coach Simp, I got a question, man. You know I appreciate you. Talked about your 1 year at Towson where you may have had your hand in a lot of things, which may have been just a little bit of recruiting or may have just here and there all over the place. Talk about the transition from going from that to UNC Greensboro, where you know Coach Miller is going to, like, that's your scouts, your baby, your recruiting area that's your baby. Talk about that transition from being a director of ops to a first-time assistant.
It was tough. It was tough, and especially because if any of you guys that don't know Wes, I mean, Wes has calmed down more now. You know, that's my guy. It's like a brother of mine. But, man, you talking about a dude who was, like, extra on edge. It's his first head coaching job. He was an interim coach initially, and a number of people were, like, shocked that he got the job. So he feels like an added pressure. He's a Carolina guy. So, man, I'm walking to this situation, Pete, and I'm like, yo, all right, you know, recruit and everything. But, like, he expects for us to have all the play calls for every single one of Wofford's plays. I'm like, dude, I remember going into his office and was like, Wes, we can't show our guys all of this stuff. We can't. Bob Hoffman stuff at Mercer, we can't. One thing I will tell you, Tim, that will help you, and I'm sure I know we talked about this a little bit. You got to be able to get to the point where you're comfortable of being in your own skin and being able to bring things to your boss. And it may be uncomfortable. You shut the door. It could be, Coach, I really believe we got to recruit this guy. We got to go all in. It could be, Coach, I think you're being an asshole towards these guys, and they feel like you're being an asshole. Like, it's too much right now. Like, those conversations need to be had. I would think if there's anything that I really grew in, man, obviously aside from the scouting and things like that, because he was young and because he was a first-time head coach, it made me be more conscious of when to bring things to the table that could help him grow as a coach without being an asshole. You know what I mean? I think we all have that power to some degree. I don't think any of our coaches would hire us if they didn't have the faith in us that, hey, I want what's best for you as a head coach and for us as a program. So aside from all the other stuff, Pete, man, like, we all can do that stuff. It's the other things, man, that like are next level that will help your relationship with your head coach and would help you add value to your program. I think it's important.
Appreciate it.
Duane, what's going on, man? Daryl LeBerry.
Daryl, how you doing, man?
I'm all right. So you just touched base on you're working with two of your point guards right now, watching video. So are you guys doing that stuff on Zoom and watching it together as a group, or are you doing it with them individually, like on a Zoom, or are you guys just sending it to them and letting them watch it and then you kind of discuss it? How is the process now of touching the guys since you can't be there with them face to face and spend time with them and help them grow?
Well, with these guys specifically, it was on a Zoom. I had already made the edit via Synergy, and we got together and we simply watched them clip by clip, and then we went back. And then I knew that there were certain things on each particular edit clip that I wanted to highlight, and I would stop it and I would like, all right, what do you guys see? What is his read right now? And it could be a situation, hey, the point guard's coming off, his buddy's in the corner. That guy didn't come bump. All right, what's the read? What should he be looking at? I pause it. What should he be looking at right now? And these are all things that we've talked about, but now that we're like away from them and everything, I want to try to take this thing to the next level. And that's pretty much what it is. We went and watched the whole thing. Then we went clip by clip, and then we would stop it, and we would get feedback from both of those guys. And this is the other thing. I think it's important, too, from a skill development standpoint. one of our guards, he can get to the basket whenever he wants to. Like, he's really strong, doesn't shoot it as well. The other one can shoot it much better, but he's much smaller. There are going to be certain passes that I would think that he should throw. Like, okay, yeah, the bigger one, he can throw this hook pass. The smaller one, no, he's not going to be doing that. All right, he's got to stop and he's got to pivot and be able to throw with his left hand. He throw the ball back. You know, so Kurt, making sure that that stuff is very detailed and specific for each one of those guys. I think too many times we almost cookie cut some of these workouts for, hey, all guards and wings and bigs. Like, our 2 point guards are completely different. Them throwing the pass to a skip pass off a ball screen, I've got to point out certain things to these guys because it's different for both of them. So hopefully that answers your question, Daryl.
It definitely did. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Coach Simpkins, Kareem Brown here, Niagara County Community College. What are some things, I guess, in the last 2 months that you think have gained either knowledge or better yourself, and then something negative that you've heard, or not really negative, but that you disagree with, that you've learned in the last 2 months with all these Zoom calls and networking?
One of the things, man, that really bothers me, and again, part of it is because I used to be a player. I'm a dad, and I'm an African-American dad. When I hear coaches say that, hey, we can't do X, Y, and Z because, I don't have the smartest guys. My guys, they can barely, keep their GPA up or whatever. I've got guys who are in the NBA, and like Simp, we got guys who, like, they weren't good students, but dude, they're basketball geniuses. I think too many times guys will equate your GPA with whether you can retain certain information as it relates to a scout, or whether you can interact necessarily with people across campus or what have you. Like, I'm just, like, as Dustin talked about, man, like, I am a big growth mindset guy. Like, don't put our guys in a box. Don't do that. Just because a guy's not interested in his communication class or his integrative science class, it doesn't mean that he can't pick up 2 different ball screen reads defensively. Like, don't do that. I think it's incumbent upon us to actually learn how our guys learn. And we sometimes have to change. Most of the times we do have to change how we communicate with our guys, how we reach our guys. Everybody doesn't learn the same. Some guys are kinesthetic learners, some guys are more audio visual. It's incumbent upon us as coaches to learn how our guys learn. So that's one thing that's really bothered me from hearing that. I actually voiced that on a Zoom that I was on last week. And then one of the things that's been really good for me, man, is it's just, again, seeing how many guys who are in this game and all the different paths that they have, man, and getting to where they are. And then also, man, I've learned a ton from guys, some high school coaches, like zone offense, quick hitter, some defensive philosophy. And I've been talking to high school coaches, man, JUCO guys. Like, it's been overload to some degree, but it's been really good. And I try to be conscious of, like, hey, man, like, you can't take all of this information. You got to be able to pick and choose. And I'll do that. I'll probably debrief at the end of the summer and everything. But, like, it's been a ton, man, that I've picked up from a wide range of guys at all levels, which has been really, really cool.
Coach Simpkins is Dom, coach at Maryland Eastern Shore.
Dom,
I just got
what
a
up?
quick, nothing much, man. Got a quick question about recruiting. How do you identify a player, and then how do you present them to your head coach? Like, what is the things that you do?
My guy's old school. We're not going to offer a kid until, like, he's seen him twice in person, until he's met him and he's talked to on the phone with him a couple of times. I know that there are going to be certain guys. Let's say he's talented, right? I think that this is a kid, like, he's A10. He'd help us. If I know, it's funny, I was recruiting a kid like this a few years ago. The kid's a mute. Like, he's just not going to talk. It's just who he is. I've got to go to him and prep my coach. Like, hey, coach, this is the deal. He's not a big time talker. Doesn't mean he's a bad kid. So from that standpoint, off the court, for me, that's a real big thing. I've got to, like, really present to my coach all the good things about the kid. In terms of, like, what I think, man, are important, if you don't have a work ethic, man, like, and just 50-50 balls will tell a whole lot. You go to You go to a workout, and I had a kid, man, it's funny, 2 years ago, he was really talented kid here in the D.C. area, long, could play. And he was at one particular school. They were doing some suicide. It wasn't suicide. They were just doing line touches. This kid cut every single line, every single one of them. But he's the most talented kid out there. It's not even close. And afterwards, the head coach was like, hey, Simp, man, you mind talking to our guys a little bit? And I said, hey, I called his name and said, bro, I'm going to be honest with you. I might not be able to recruit you after this, but I feel I'm doing you a disservice if I don't point it out to you. I was like, dude, I'm an assistant coach from a university, and I see you out here and you cut every single line. In my mind, I'm thinking you're very talented, but there's no way in hell I'm going to go to war with you, because all you're going to do, you're going to cut corners. Fast forward the following year, I'm like, I might have to try to recruit this kid. I know the people around him and everything like this. I got to recruit him. He's at another school. They do something very similar to start the workout. You know, this kid cut every damn single line again, every one of them. And it got to the point where, like, he went on to prep school, and like everybody's like, Simp, man, you should recruit him, whatever. And I was like, I told my coach, don't do it. We can't. We might be able to get the kid, but you're gonna look up a year from now, 2 from now, and you're gonna be so frustrated with yourself, or he's just gonna bounce anyway. He's not a winner. And he's a good kid, but I try to stay away from situations like that. I think too many times we want to try to win the quote unquote press conference or get the hot recruit and everything. Man, I've never been one to. I never subscribe to that, because at the end of the day, it's not going to help your program. And on the flip side, you got to know your coach. That's not good for your coach. There's certain guys, my coach he can coach, and there's certain guys that he can't. I know that. I'm doing myself a disservice. It'd be selfish of me to be able to say, hey, oh, Duane got this kid, man, he's a top 150 guy. That top 150 guy could also get you fired too. You know?
Gotcha. Appreciate it, Coach.
No doubt.
Hey, Coach Simpkins, Devontae out of Louisville, Kentucky. Question for you. How do you guys as a staff identify candidates for roles like Director of Video Ops, Director of Player Personnel? How do you guys identify candidates for those jobs?
I can tell you with my coach, Dave Paulson, man, he's a big relationship guy. If he has no connection with you whatsoever, it's probably not going to happen. Probably not going to happen. It has to be somebody that's somewhat in his wheelhouse, people that he knows. And he's one of the most accessible dudes I've ever seen, like, to a fault. You know, I'm hey, Coach, we're on court 6. We're in Indianapolis. Hey, Coach, we're on court 6 at 10 o'clock. You got to watch number 23 and number 10. And Coach is such a great dude, man. He's sitting next to dudes and he's chopping it up and he's rapping everything. And I'm nudging, like, Coach, 23 and 10, man, 23 and 10. But so I say all that to say he is a guy that, like, if you were to reach out to him and stay in contact and stay in, like, you will be in his circle to some degree. And I think there are a number of coaches that are like that. Like, very few guys are not going to hire you not knowing you. There's some like that. There's some that are not. But I can tell you that my guy, you've got to be somewhat in his circle. And then obviously you got to be able to do the job. But he doesn't know anything about damn technology anyway. So his biggest thing is like, do I know you? You know, you're going to have some guys that may be like that. You may not have the most, you may not be the best at that particular job, but you have a relationship with the coach. I think that's really important.
Thanks, Coach.
Anyone else for Coach Simpkins?
Man, I took up a lot of time. I really appreciate it, man. I didn't mean to go that long. I apologize.
No, all good, Coach. All good. All really good stuff, and got a lot of good stuff to take down and think on. So, Coach
See what
Simpkins,
the Xavier dude's got to do, man. I want to hear the Xavier dude right now. He's got all this good stuff from Xavier.
I don't know about all that.
well, shoot, Coach Simpkins, I appreciate you, brother. Thanks for taking the time to come share with everybody, and obviously I value your time. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much, man. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Lastly up, I guess when they do starting lineup introductions, they always say the man in the middle for the last. So we'll say the big fella for last.
The most undersized center known in basketball. So there you go.
But no, I'm glad Coach Hayes is on. I got to know Coach Hayes back when I was at Anderson University, and Coach Hayes was a Division II coach at
Exactly
Belmont
right.
Abbey. I'll be honest, I was a freshman manager
Yeah.
And I had no idea anything. You know, I was my first managing and first experience in college. And I look over on the other sideline, and I'm like, this dude looks like the part. You know, I don't know if he knows anything, but he looks the part. I was like, I need to get to know this guy. So actually, Coach Hayes has really been great to call him a friend and keep in touch with him. And I'm excited for him to share his journey and everything. So, Coach Hayes, it's all yours.
Appreciate it, David. I just want to say hello to everybody. I really do appreciate you thinking enough of me to be a part of this. I think it's a big-time deal. I've learned a lot from Coach Kerns. Learned a great deal from Coach Simpkins. And so what I want to do, I just want to just go over my story, how I matriculated through the business. Started playing basketball when I was 6 years old, 1987. So in my own world, I like to call myself a 33-year vet in this deal, in my own little world. So I've been involved in basketball. Basketball is what I do. I love it. It runs deep. And I couldn't think of, and there's so many people that's been a part of it in my story that I like to thank, but I just want to go step by step what I've been through. A lot of you guys may want to ask, how did I get the itch to coach? Well, the itch to coach for me started back in my senior in high school, I believe it was 1999. And at that time, we was one of the top 10 or 12 basketball teams in the state. We was in one of the toughest regions in the state, 7 Quad A, South DeKalb, Redan, Chattahoochee, Dunwoody, all when they were really, really good. Half of our region was ranked in the top 15 of the state. My brother and I, we was, of course, at Douglas, and my brother was kicked out of a game. I think it's our last game of our regular season at Redan High School. And when you get kicked out, the very next game you have to sit out. So at that time, the state of Georgia required that you have to make the semifinals of your conference tournament, region tournament, to qualify for state. Well, we're going to be out without one of our best players going to Chattahoochee to play Chattahoochee for a spot to be qualified to go to the tournament. So I'm sitting here on pins and needles thinking about what in the world should I do, what we got to do. And I can remember going to Coach Bonner, a high school coach at the time, and I got so much game film of Chattahoochee that I did my first scouting report. All right, so I did my scouting report. This is a game we had to win, a game that we absolutely had to take to get to the tournament. At that time, Douglas had gone 4 years without qualifying for a state tournament. As many talented teams as Douglas had, they've gone 4 years without going to a tournament. And so I can remember staying up all night with my brother Jarvis, breaking down Chattahoochee. And so the next day we getting ready to ride on the bus. Of course, Jarvis couldn't go. And I asked Coach Bonner, can I, build this, hand out this scouting report so our guys can take a look at it while we're on the bus ride to Chattahoochee. And so I remember landing on each seat and say, you better not say a MFing thing on this whole ride, but you read this scouting report so you can familiarize yourself with Chattahoochee. And so I'm like, okay, so we get to game one. And so ever since then, I said, I kind of like this coaching thing, just viewing basketball from a different angle. All right. So my brother and I, we went to Western Carolina. We at the University of Georgia now. And so at that time, Elgin Andrews had become the high school coach at Douglas. And he allowed me to be the head coach of our summer league for 2 straight years, my sophomore and junior year. At Georgia, he allowed me to coach. So I'm like, okay, this is exactly what I want to do. So my senior year comes at the University of Georgia, and quite naturally, you think, well, if you're a former student athlete and you want to get into coaching, you quite naturally want to stay on with your coach who you played for. You get a graduate assistant job, and to Coach Kerns, the route I took the stairs going backwards with the lights off. All right, wasn't no express button. It wasn't no elevator I had to get on. I took the stairs walking backwards. Something happened with Coach Harrick where he wasn't allowed to coach my senior year. So in comes Dennis Felton, and I must admit I was immature, and I made life a living hell for me and Dennis Felton. Anytime it was rebellion. The coach that I become, really, really close with, I created a relationship with, he was out of the game. He no longer could help. And so I'm kind of like a nomad trying to figure out, okay, what's my next move? And eventually my senior year, Dennis Felton and I, we got on the same page, but that wasn't an opportunity for me to stay and be his graduate assistant. So I'm feeling like, okay, I got to start over and try to recreate myself. So I ended up going back to my high school. So I started at the very lowest level. I started at my high school, went to the Elite Eight. Michael Mezzio was the coach at that time. And we went to the Elite Eight. The very next year, I was hired at Morehouse with Grady Brewer. Grady Brewer had graduated from Douglas. He had taken a liking to my brother and I. You know, obviously he followed our career at Douglas. He had no reason to hire me. I had zero college coaching experience. I had zero recruiting experience. The only thing I played and I coached in high school. Well, I get to Morehouse College, and Grady Brewer allowed me to make mistake after mistake after mistake. I'm wet behind the ears, didn't know my ass from a hole in the ground, but he allowed me to make mistake after mistake after mistake. I got on the road recruiting. He put me in charge at 24 years old. I was his quote unquote defensive coordinator. And so the responsibility a head coach give a young assistant coach that much leeway, for me, I make mistake after mistake, but he told me he kept at it. I kept at it. And he was the type of coach that allowed me to understand the very importance of detail. When I make a mistake, he wouldn't chastise me in front of the whole group or the whole staff like Coach Kerns was saying. He would bring me into his office, and he would correct me in his own little way. And so I'll forever be grateful for that opportunity. And so at the end of that year, all right, the end of that year, Coach Jamal Brown had just gotten the job at South Carolina State, which is Division I, it's the MEAC. So I'm feeling good about myself. I'm progressing up this. I'm going from high school, I'm going to D2. Hell, I'm at Division I, my third year in coaching. Well, as fate have it, at the end of that year, we were all let go. And so I'm feeling like, okay, what in the world I'm getting ready to do? I got to start all over. And keeping in mind, the college coach I played for was no longer in the business. Okay, his assistant coaches, they were not in positions where they could hire me. And so I'm feeling like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have a lot of connections, so I'm just kind of just floating around. And at that time, my brother Jarvis was starting up his nonprofit organization, and he started an AAU program, all right? So he wanted me to coach his AAU program, and I did it to stay in the game. And we had a successful AAU program. We focused on middle Georgia and southern Georgian kids. But it allowed me to stay in the game, just hard work, put my head down, the grind of an AAU season. As many of you guys know, dealing with AAU coaching, you know that's a real grind. When you got to set up travel, when you got to deal with parents, you got to deal with recruitment from other AAU programs. That is raising money. That is a grind known to no other. So at the end of that summer, we had a very successful summer. We finished probably 7th in the nation. My brother on here probably correct me. But probably finished 7th in the nation. At the end of that summer in July, Stephen Miss, which was a staff member at the University of Georgia, he got the Belmont Abbey job. And he asked me would I want to have an opportunity to come on his staff. And I said, you're damn right I would. I wanted to get back in college. I thought what we were building with my brother with Georgia Select and his nonprofit organization, we could have grown that to being an unbelievable program. But the pull for me to go back to college, I think was great. So he brought me on to Belmont Abbey. I'm not certain if you guys are familiar with Belmont Abbey. That's on the west side of Charlotte, the edge of civilization. It's a small Division II program. Albert Wyatt coached there. At the time, it was in Conference Carolinas. They hadn't had a winning season in the prior 7 or 8 years. So I get the job, not knowing what to expect. We went 20 games the first year, and so we started having a little success with Coach Miss. And he's the guy that gave me carte blanche over that whole program in terms of scheduling, player development, recruiting, fundraising. He allowed me to connect with our athletic director, our president, our senior women's administrator. So he gave me carte blanche with that program. But I was there 5 years, and I could remember at the 4th and 5th year, I started feeling down for myself. Because I'm at Division II. You feel like what you do, the work you've done, is like a tree falling in the forest, right? You don't know if anybody's seeing you, and you want to progress in this business, but you don't know if anybody is paying any attention. So I can remember vividly, and I'm very religious. And I need to stop cursing. I feel really good about myself, but I'm very religious. So I started praying. I said, Lord, I want to be in a position where I got a bigger check. I want to be in a bigger school. I want to be where basketball matters. I want to be someplace where what I do, people notice it and it matters, and I can have an opportunity to move up. And so I was feeling really, really bad. It was about February of 2012. And I can remember very vividly feeling really, really down. And I can remember my inner voice, the Lord telling me, Jonas, you're praying for the wrong thing. All right. Instead of praying for more, instead of praying for more money, instead of praying for a bigger job, instead of praying for being at Division I, you need to pray to be the best Division II basketball coach you could be. And so immediately I started changing my thought process. Okay. And so I could remember saying, okay, I cannot go rub elbows and go network, so to speak, with all these different people. And I got a job to do. I got 15 guys I need to worry about. I need player development. We need to recruit. I need to fundraise at the school I'm at now to be the best Division II basketball coach I could possibly be. So fast forward a month. So we in March, late March, getting ready to be the Final Four. Mark Schlonecker, you guys are not familiar with Mark Schlonecker, but he is at University of Georgia, and he's part of the Bulldog Club. And this is just a caravan of where they go to different cities, and they get together with all the former alumni and former players and just supporters of the University of Georgia. So Mark Schlonecker calls me and said, Jonas, we're going to bring the Bulldog Club to the downtown Charlotte Marriott. I want you to be there. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. In my mind, I'm thinking, I can't go and rub elbows with a lot of people. I need to be focused on, being the best Division II basketball coach I possibly could be. And so here we go. He calls, and I said, okay, listen, I may come. I don't know. I got a lot of work to get done here, but you can put me down, and we'll see how it goes. So a month later, before the event, he calls again and says, Jonas, I just want to remind you that the Bulldog Club is coming down to Charlotte. We're going to be at the downtown Marriott, and I would really, 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 really love for you to show up. And I said, well, Coach, at this time, I got my recruiting schedule. I was supposed to be in Lexington, right outside of Columbia, South Carolina, on that Wednesday afternoon, and then I was supposed to be in Salisbury at another event. I said, Coach, I won't be able to make it because I got my schedule filled up. I need to go and recruit. And in my mind, I was thinking, okay, I need to go be the best Division II basketball coach I can be. I don't have time to, deviate from what the plan, that I needed to become. So he calls me a day before the event again and said, Jonas, I just want to check and see if you're gonna be able to make it to this Bulldog Club event. It's going to be a lot of people there. I think that's going to be able to help you, to help raise some money for Belmont Abbey, can help you in all different fashions. I said, you know what? Mark, I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm sorry. The next time you guys come, I want you guys to, you let me know, then I could probably make it. And he said, you know what, Jonas, that's fine. I'm going to put your name down anyway as somebody that's going to be there. If you decide to come, if you decide to change your mind, you can come on up. So here we are. The next day, I'm headed to Columbia, South Carolina, where I was living at in Belmont is probably about an hour away. This event's supposed to start at 6 o'clock. All right. So I'm getting off the exit. All right, in Columbia, South Carolina, it's probably about 5:45, and I had to pull off on the exit on the side of the road, turn my radio off, and I was crying because the only thing I heard, the voice was telling me, Jonas, you need to go to that event. You need to go to that event. And I get vivid when I'm talking, and of course I thought it was the Lord talking to me. He said that was the same voice that telling me that you need to be focused on being the best Division II basketball coach, but then turn around, it's the same person telling me you need to go. And I was really talking about 15 minutes. So I decided to go, turn around. I was going to be there late. I'm thinking they was going to be in their little happy hour still. So I get there. I had to go home, change clothes, put on some slacks, put on a polo shirt. So I get there around 8 o'clock, not 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock. It's about 30 minutes after it was supposed to begin. And I'm thinking they're going to be past the happy hour and all. They were still in happy hour. Number one, I go to check in, Jonas Hayes, but it had me working for the Charlotte Bobcats. So I took it, not Belmont Abbey, but I take that. So I walk in, I'm shaking hands, didn't know a soul there. I'm shaking hands, talking to anybody that talked to me. And okay, we get with it. And I'm eating all these hors d'oeuvres. And so I get to the next step, and it's this big, huge ballroom. And in the far corner, I see Coach Rick and I see Mark Fox. And so I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, Slun didn't tell me that Mark Fox was going to be here. I've talked to Mark Fox one time in my entire life. It was at Disney One summer, he was outside on the phone. I just shook his hand. He was on the phone, didn't have no other conversation with him. So I'm saying, okay, so here's the head coach of my program. I really don't know him. You know what? I'm going to go shake his hand. All right. I knew Coach Rick. Coach Rick was there when I was at Georgia when he got hired. So I shook Coach Rick's hand. I shook Mark Fox's hand. He was signing autographs, taking pictures. So I went off. All right. And I'm still eating my orders and still doing my deal, talking to anybody who would talk to me. And so when the event started, I'm thinking it's about 300 people. That's a huge ballroom. I'm thinking I'm going to sit in the last row of the last seat, right in the corner. So everybody seated. It's get quiet, all right? A tap on my shoulder. I'm looking up. Hey, we want you to come sit up front. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to have to speak. I wasn't prepared to speak. So no, we just want you to sit up front. So here I am. I'm walking up front, okay? And I'm sitting right next to Mark Fox. So I'm like, okay, something is really happening now. I'm sitting right next to Mark Fox. I wasn't really supposed to be here. I had made up some all type of excuse to not to be here, but I'm sitting right next to Mark Fox, and my hands start sweating, my palms start sweating. And I'm like, okay, what the hell I'm gonna say? I'm fumbling, I'm foaming at the mouth, don't know what to say. And I'm like, I got to say something to him, but I was a mute mouth then. So Mark Fox, he gets up, he talks about the basketball program, he sit back down. I'm still fidgeting. I'm like this, I can't even look at him. Mark Rick got up, he spoke about the football program, he sat back down. And Chuck Dowd was the MC, he's getting ready to close this deal up. And so we stand up, shaking hands, and I turned my back to Mark Fox. After I shook his hand, I said, I got to say something to him. I don't know what to say. I don't know, the words not coming to me. And so I turned back around and said, Mark Fox, if there's anything I can do in the state of Georgia to help you out, I don't know what it'll be, but give me a call. And so he paused about 2 seconds. And at that 2 seconds seemed like 15 seconds to me. He paused about 2 seconds. And at that time, my heart was in my throat. And what did this man get ready to say? He said, you know what, Jonas? I got an operations job. I want you to apply for it, okay? And when I tell you, I was applying for it on my phone as I was driving back home, all right? I interviewed for that job as an operations coordinator on that Monday, 1 week from being at an event that I was never intended myself to go to. I had a job at the University of Georgia as his operations guy. And I got emotional again. And all I heard the Lord telling me again, Jonas, I've already ordered your steps. All you have got to do is just have just enough faith to keep on stepping. And so for me, what I took out of that, and I didn't know a lot of people in business. Of course, I played at the University of Georgia. Of course, people knew me, but they really didn't know me. And the one thing I took from even working with Grady Brewer, Stephen Miss, Mark Fox, even working with my brother, you have always got to be aware of the perception that you give off, all right? When people don't know you, all right, and especially in our profession, when people do not know you, the only thread they have got to go on is how you present yourself. And I've been fortunate, and Coach Brewer is the first person who told me that when you're going into a room where people don't know you, okay, you have got to present yourself in a way where you're serious about what you're doing. And so for me, that's just my journey in basketball. I know that's quick. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm in the throes of moving, but I really wanted to share just my story, as unconventional as it is. And that's just me, Coach. You got any questions?
Well, shoot, I appreciate that, Coach Hayes. I didn't even know that part about that. That's how you got to Georgia. I know you got there, and
yeah, that won't be in my bio, baby. You told me that.
That's exactly that's what we wanted right there. That's what we wanted. I could read that you went to Georgia, not how you got there. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, obviously, go ahead and you speak up, introduce yourself, and ask away.
Jonas, Cliff Warren at Georgia State. So
I didn't
similar.
realize his first name was John either.
It's all right. It's all right. Call me whatever you want. So similar to the question I asked to Duane earlier about his connection.
Yep.
as high school coach, knowing Dean Smith.
Yep.
Your connection, either because you are a twin
Yep.
to Jarvis Hayes,
Yep.
or he's a twin to you, whatever we want to say.
I like that better.
Sorry. And you both were really good players at UGA.
Yep.
Your brother was fortunate enough to play in the NBA.
Yep.
Et cetera, et cetera. And then you mentioned Mark Sloniger inviting you to an event.
Yep.
Because of that connection.
Yep.
Helped elevate your professional career.
Yep.
Just like I asked Duane, for those who don't have that kind of connection,
yep,
what else can you do?
So for me, when you go, number one, people, like I said a minute ago, people are going to make an impression about you one way or the other. So when you go into a gym, when you think nobody is watching you or nobody is observing you, they are. So when you step into a gym, you need to always be cognizant of how you present yourself, man, how you dress. I'll give you a story. It's a Perry Clark at South Carolina. He told me, and I know some people may do this, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but I used to walk in gyms when I was 23, 24, 25 years old with always a book bag. I walk with a big book bag. I carry my books all over the place. And I never will forget, we was in Atlanta. I think we were at Mays High School. And I went to the restroom, I had my book bag on, and Perry Clark beelined behind me. And I didn't know Perry Clark. You know, I knew of him, but I didn't think he knew me. But he beelined behind me to the restroom, and two men in the restroom and said, "Jonas, what are your goals in this business?" Okay, he said, "Well, I told him I wanted to be a head coach." Well, if that's your goal, you need to start dressing and acting like a head coach. And he told me, and I walked back out the restroom with him, "I want you to count how many head coaches are walking around here with basketball shorts on and a book bag on." And I stood there for maybe about 4 or 5 minutes. I was trying to count, not many of them. And he said, you always need to be aware of the perception you give up. If you want to be a head coach, okay, if you want to be a head coach, you got to start presenting yourself like one. Not to say you are, but present yourself like one. And another thing I will say, do not be afraid to reach out to people unannounced through an email or even a call or a card. Okay, don't be afraid, because when you break down life, and what we call life, when you break down who you are, who your mama was, who your daddy was, your socioeconomic background, whether you're white, black, tall, short, big, small, whatever, it's all about connecting with people. And you have to be okay with 99 people ghosting your email or ghosting your text message just to get to that one. You can't be discouraged when I can tell you how many jobs I've applied for, how many calls I didn't get back. You know, you can't allow that to discourage you. You have got to keep moving forward. Coach Fox used to have a saying, you got to fight forward. You never tough alone, but you got to fight forward. And just because you don't have people responding to your text message, you got 99 people that don't respond to an email, you got to keep moving forward. And so for me, that would be the advice. Try to work as hard as you can to create connection wherever possible. It could be at Final Four, but shooting emails. But people, for the coaches who are out on the road recruiting, how you present yourself, I think that is really, really big time key.
Thanks.
Anyone else, Coach Hayes?
Coach Hayes, John Mandeldove here. Similar to a similar question to Coach from George Mason. How do you use your playing experience in regards to your coaching experience with today's youth? How do you try to correlate those two?
Well, so for me, I think I can still get out there and demonstrate the laws of learning. As you explain, you can demonstrate it, then you do it, and then you repeat. But for me right now, I can still get out there and play. But for me, I do think I've broken down the barrier of just being our student athletes coach. You know, you have to break down the barrier so they can start trusting you. And I get our guys to understand what I'm teaching them. Of course, I'm the front court coach. I teach them from experience, not from what I read, not from what somebody told me. If you can get your guys to trust you in what you're saying. But for me, you know, it's much easier for me because I'm black, I'm big, and I get a little demonstrative in my explanation. but I do break down the barrier of them just being my players. I really get to know our guys. I meet them on their level, because really they don't really give a care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so I spend a lot of time off the basketball court trying to gain their trust, which will then allow me to coach them.
Jay Hayes.
Maddox.
Morehead State. I know you talked a lot about imaging and perception. And what other ways are you preparing yourself to be a head coach?
Well, for me, getting on these calls has helped me out. This is part of my third one I've done. Getting on these calls and presenting yourself to athletics directors, presenting yourself to search firm people, to presidents. So for me, the next step for me, and the reason I asked Dustin that question, I'm trying to navigate how do you prepare for being a head coach without neglecting the job you have now. And for me, I'm really one-track mind, and I probably need to do a better job of reaching out to search firms, reaching out to athletic directors, doing those like now, doing these dead periods. And so for me, I'm just trying to navigate the notion of preparing myself for that while also doing the job I have here at Xavier. And that's tough. I'm finding that is really, really tough.
Coach Hayes, I have a question. You didn't really talk about going from, operations to assistant. Mm-hmm. What were you doing during that time when you were operations guy just to prepare yourself to be an assistant?
Oh, so I was doing scouting reports as an ops guy. I was doing personnel studies. I was doing scouting reports. So I couldn't present them, but I was doing scouting reports as an operations guy. And of course, I was immensely involved with the academic side. I would go to these Bulldog Club meetings as an employee of Georgia, and I would give presentations then. But it is a big difference when you are called upon to lead a group of people, not from an operations position, when you got, and Coach Fox used to put a lot of emphasis on the assistant coaches. When it's your scout, it is your scout. So you got to be prepared to answer questions. You got to be prepared to answer tough questions that you may have to be thinking quick on your feet. But it's a to be put in front of a room as an assistant coach is much different than being in the back of the room behind the scenes operations. And for me, I had to get comfortable talking in front of a group. That was probably one of my, because you never had to do it. You at Division 2 level, you do it in front of 10 or 12 people. But the more you do it, the better off you get.
Anyone else got any questions for Coach Hayes?
Yeah, I got one. Coach Hayes, Kareem Brown, Niagara Community College. What difficulties have you really said you've made strides in throughout your coaching career that you had to overcome?
You broke up. That may be my phone. That may be my computer. Say that again.
Yeah, no problem. What difficulties you think you've overcome with throughout your years in coaching that you've really, really made strides with? Well,
for me, the piece about recruiting in that every level you go up, there's going to be some extracurricular activities you're going to have to navigate. For me, you cannot always just rely on, who you know to get you a ball player. Okay, you can't, just because I know Cabral Huff, just because I know, Larry Thompson on this call, I never expect those guys to land me a basketball player, okay? And so the one thing I had to learn is there's no substitute for your own hard work. There's no substitute for you as an assistant coach creating that connection with not only the kid, but his parents and whoever else that's around that kid. And so for me, the higher level you go up, the more extracurricular activities you encounter, you just have to find ways to navigate around that. But I think the most important thing that will give you a chance is creating relationships. And I Coach Warren said it again, the connection piece, I think is at a core who I am, and connecting with people will allow you to overcome a great deal.
I think Coach Mims had a question. Or go ahead.
Hey, Coach Hayes, this is CJ Rooks out here in San Diego. I'm actually Florida born and raised, so I remember you and your brother giving the Gators a hard time in college. But I just was wondering, you know, as a club high school coach, AAU coach out here, how is it? How could someone like myself get in contact with college coaches to draw their attention to some of the kids we might have that might have the ability to go to the next level? What is something that kind of grabs your attention when you have high school coaches reaching out to you about a kid that they might have to come play for you?
So for me, persistence always sticks out for me. And you're going to have, as like I told you a minute ago, and you may get 100 people or 99 people to disregard your email. You got to keep sending them. Persistence always pays off. And I think if the more they see you consistent in your persistence, you'll crack a few of them. Like for me, I follow every lead. You know, I don't care if I get a doggone email from Mars. I'm going to check it out. If you got a player, and I evaluate the kid. But most coaches, you know, obviously when you get a whole bunch of email, they just put it into the bulk, to the junk file or whatever. You have got to be persistent. That's the only way you can do it. You know, obviously, people are going to evaluate your kids. You got to have good ball players. But if you want to get exposure for your kids as a high school coach, you have to be persistent in that manner. Be persistent. And be consistent.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Coach Mims, you still have a question?
Yes, sir. Coach Hayes, how you doing, man?
How you doing, brother?
Not much, man. Couple questions that kind of run together. One, from you, your journey getting to Xavier, and two, the adjustments at Xavier that maybe was different from the last place you came before you arrived at Xavier.
The adjustments I made from Xavier was quite naturally getting to know this region of the country. You know, everything I grew up about was, you know, sitting around the Southeast was, you know, you have to kind of navigate the football piece. Everything revolves around football. And so for me, coming up to this region, number one, I had to get to know the Midwest a little bit better. But knowing how to navigate, on to your second point, knowing how to navigate a basketball-first institution. That is something that was foreign to me. You read about schools that are basketball first, but to be a part of an institution where you got smart fans and they will let you know when you suck, being able to grow thicker skin and be in this environment has been huge for me. Has been huge for me. And but for me, going back to your first point, getting to know this region, getting to know the high school coaches, AAU coaches, you know, in this region, and of course, learn how to navigate. It's a basketball first, basketball intense environment.
Thank you, Coach.
Any last questions for Coach Hayes?
I have a question. I have one. Go ahead. I'll go after you.
Hey, Coach Hayes. This is Coach Jones. I'm in Georgia. I remember those schools you were talking about. I actually was a girls varsity coach at Middle Grove High School.
There you go.
So my question to you is, you know, when you're offered a head coaching position, what do you try to accomplish on the job day one?
Try to build as many relationships with people on campus in addition to the kids that I have in that locker room. There's no people more important than the people in your locker room. And you try to build, like Coach Kerns said, you try to build your army on campus. All right. So anytime you meet, I try to meet as many people as I can on that campus. But I'm going to spend a great deal of my time with the players that I'm inheriting. For me, that's very important because you have got to get to know those kids. You can't go in with preconceived notions. You can't come in burning the city down just because of what you heard or what didn't happen or what happened prior to. But you have got to create relationships with those guys and people on campus immediately.
Hey, Coach Hayes, it's Devontae out of Louisville, Kentucky. Question for you. Your transition, doing well, great day to be alive. What are some of your favorite books that you've read?
The Pyramid of Success by John Wooden, and that's probably one of my favorite. I do like Soup. I like The Energy Bus, but my go-to is anything John Wooden. Anything John Wooden. And I know Jim Harrick, the reason I have that John Wooden fandom is just because Jim Harrick He was a pupil of John Wooden. I had an opportunity to meet John Wooden, had to pick his brain. And I thought the thought process of what he would determine, what he would define success was something that really spoke to me. And so I'm a huge, big time follower of John Wooden.
Any more questions for Coach Hayes?
Yes, sir. One more.
Go ahead,
Coach
Coach.
C. right at West Harrison High School, Gulfport, Mississippi. Can you talk about analytics, the importance of learning that skill from transitioning from high school to college?
It's important. I said, don't lose the sight of your intuition. Your eyes don't lie to you. I think analytics, it has a big impact on our game, but don't lose the sight of what your eyes see. You know, you've been a part of basketball. You studied basketball. I'm a fan of analytics. I'm not the greatest fan of analytics because I know numbers can lie. You can probably get them to say whatever you want them to say. And I use them. I do use them percentages-wise, but it's a big part of the game. But I would say do not lose sight of the fact, trusting your own eyes and trusting your thought process. Don't do that. Don't lose sight of that.
Shoot. Coach Hayes, this has been great. I appreciate your time and you coming on to share with us. You have any last closing thoughts you want to leave with?
No, I mean, my number, I'm going to put my number in this chat.
Awesome.
For those who don't have it, feel free to give me a call. And we all still trying to figure this thing out, man. I don't know all the answers. I'm trying to make it just like many of you guys are. But if I could be a resource to you guys, you know, feel free to reach out. Let me see if I got this right. Yeah, that's it. Feel free to reach out to me. Hell, I didn't want to put the wrong digits up there for you guys. But there you go.
So awesome. Well, Coach Hayes, Coach Simpkins, and Coach Kerns, obviously I really appreciate you guys coming on and sharing with us, taking your time. I don't take your time lightly. So thank you guys for all the nuggets you shared with us, and thank everyone for joining in on the call today. We'll obviously be back again next week, so stay tuned. But thank you again, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, fellas. Guys, be easy, man.
Guys.
And if you're interested, Rising Coaches is doing a high school to college panel after this. The link is in the chat or it's on YouTube. So if you're interested in that, obviously head on over, check that out. So see you guys next week.